The strike on Syria, U.S. ships to North Korea, and the United passenger fiasco. I'm Heather Godwin, and this is The Square Circle. Hello and welcome to The Square Circle. I'm your host, Heather Godwin. Joining us today are Bill Buck of MyWallet.com, Jerrod Labor of Young Voices Advocates, and conservative writer and editor Brian McNicoll. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Late last week, the Trump administration ordered a missile strike on Syria in retaliation for a chemical weapons attack on Syrian civilians. The political and diplomatic effects are still reverberating, with U.S. relations with Russia at a low point. So, Brian McNicoll, was this a good idea, or does this put us in dire jeopardy with Russia?
I don't think we're in dire jeopardy with Russia. It's an interesting idea. I think clearly the way it was carried out and so forth, it was as much about sending a message that the U.S. posture in that part of the world was about to change. We spent 40 years getting the Russians out of Syria, and then the last administration allowed them to get back in, and so now it's a new reality you have to deal with now. And so that was part of this. That was like, we're coming back. We're not going to accept that result anymore. Could be for better or for worse. It was interesting. Group of people who liked it and didn't like it. There were a lot of people on the right that's like, that's not what we voted you in to do. Mm-hmm. It's not. What does that have to do with making America great again? There are a lot of people on the left, Schumer and Pelosi came out in support of it. So it's drawn, an interesting thing. One of the things that bothers me about it is, supposedly it was, they showed him pictures of the children, okay? And that touched his heart, and then it touched Ivanka's heart. And then, we went out, and we can't really conduct foreign policy by showing him pictures, him and his daughter pictures, right? That's a little
of an emotional reaction.
It's a little, yeah. And so,
really.
But there are some benefits. The Chinese are, sending back North Korean coal. The Russians are taking new note of who we are and what we are in the region. So, can you draw any conclusions yet? I don't think so.
Jerrod Labor, what's your opinion?
Well, I think ultimately it's not going to be that useful. If he was really moved by the images of the kids who were killed in the chemical gas attack, this is not going to do anything to actually help anyone in Syria. If anything, the Assad regime may just double down now. The violence is not going to stop just because of a single U.S. strike on a military base. And part of me is thinking, if Trump really was moved, if it was like a heartfelt reaction, then I am a little confused as to why the sort of hardline stance against Syrian refugees, particularly Syrian refugee children and everything. It seems to me that would be, if you really are concerned about the plight of the kids, mm-hmm. that would be a good way to help.
Yeah, has he not seen pictures of the Syrian refugee children that are having to flee their country? And what's your opinion, Bill Buck?
Yeah, if all the decisions are going to get made by what's seen on television, that I think would make everybody at this table a little bit uncomfortable. I don't know that this moved the ball forward very far as vital U.S. interests overall. I don't know that Assad took this as such a devastating action that he would never gas his own people. He is, he is a brutal dictator. There are a lot of brutal dictators in the world. This has been, a question that has, flummoxed administrations, both Republican and Democrat. What do you do about these horrible actors? Whether, you look at what happened in Bosnia, you look at some of the atrocities in Africa. Mm-hmm. There is a limit to the effectiveness that we can have in the world, and we take Libya, for example, which was a big point of contention in this last presidential election. You saw a country completely collapse
which is better, which is worse is a, real philosophical debate. But if there isn't a real end game where you put a country back together, and we've never managed to do that.
Do that after Iraq, right?
You have to tread lightly on these things, because the devil that you know is often better than the devil that you don't know. And you have to have some sort of plan and buy-in from, a coalition of partners. And there is not a State Department right now where the United States can take the lead on this. Somebody else in the world is going to have to step in and take the lead. And I think that may be one of the things we see over the next few years is other countries in Europe potentially stepping up and being leaders on the global stage in a way that, there's a void right now. And I think that there may be some opportunities for established leaders in Europe to step into that.
Brian McNicoll, do you think that this really has hurt us with Russia, or are they just doing this for show? Because, Putin has come right out.
At first he wasn't going to see Tillerson, then he spent 2.5 hours with him. So, they realized, basically what has happened is us, China, and Russia are now on the same side against terrorism, right? We're all on, how do we control it and manage these populations and so forth. And it's not, it's like the refugee question is a separate question. Our dispute is on the other side of it. The refugee question is, where are these, how do you manage this to where you're not overrun with violence and what's going on in Europe and so forth? All those guys are looking at Europe and saying, we don't want to be that, because it is upheaval that the society's not prepared to deal with.
It didn't sound like it went very well, though, with Tillerson and Putin. From all the reports that I've read, there's a lot of tension.
Well, they reset it to where it was before this happened. They have the hotline open. They're cooperating on the stuff they said they'd cooperate on before, And they were warned, which, a lot of people made a big deal out of that. But, you don't want to bomb their assets. If you're not at war with Russia, you don't want to be bombing Russian people and things, right? Because then you could wind up at war with Russia, which is a lot more serious than being at war with Syria.
Yeah, that's something we've always been afraid of. And Jerrod Labor, what's your opinion on this with Russia and how our relations are?
There's a lot of Russia hysteria in the country right now. I don't doubt one bit that Russia, like all countries, using their intelligence services as at a way to try to influence elections and things like that. The U.S. also has a long history of influencing elections in Latin America and other places in Europe. So I don't doubt that Russia maybe tried to have an impact, but still the hysteria surrounding it, and you're seeing this on on Rachel Maddow and whatnot. Every night there's a new segment about Russia. It seems to me that particularly with regards to Syria, that bombing, potentially risking, maybe killing like a Russian soldier or something like that. It doesn't seem very useful.
All right. Well, I'd like to remind our viewers that you can submit your questions to our guests through our website, www.publicsquare.net, and we'll answer as many as we can live on air toward the end of the show. Moving on, another potential crisis is brewing in Northeast Asia. At this moment, a U.S. carrier group is heading to the Sea of Japan as a show of force against North Korea's recent aggression. So, Bill Buck, is this going to escalate the situation?
I don't know. I have sort of a tongue-in-cheek thought based on the president's, being influenced by visual media. Perhaps they show him a snippet of The Princess Bride.
Princess Bride.
Yes, where he's counseled to never get involved in a land war in Asia. And maybe that will set him straight. There's a lot to be concerned about here, obviously. We're sending destroyers as well that are capable of firing Tomahawk missiles. The president, as reported, is traveling to Florida without White House senior staff for the Easter weekend.
He's traveling without White House senior staff?
That is what the Bloomberg White House political reporter
has
reported today, that there were not White House senior staff on Air Force One.
What implications do you think that has?
I mean, I guess we all should just watch Twitter.
The breaking news on Twitter, that's really the...
No, but but the news that he
It's
breaks as
true.
well.
Yeah.
You know, it is unsettling. It doesn't seem to be strategic. Tillerson does not seem to be a very engaged or capable Secretary of State. He has no staff. The State Department has been pretty well emptied out. And you have a Department of Defense and a very inexperienced White House that is on its heels, given the Flynn situation. They are not up to speed even where you should be, 87, 88 days into an administration.
So from a standpoint of support, you're saying that really, if the State Department isn't as engaged as it normally is, then you're not getting the best or the advice, or really any for that matter.
Or, at least, the idea of having some sort of diplomatic outcome seems greatly reduced.
Brian, what's your opinion?
Well, he's got the Chinese certainly have seen it, come to see things our way on this. They have put 400,000 soldiers across the Yalu River. They're getting ready to handle refugees, manage what they expect to be a refugee situation. They've refused shipments of North Korean coal, sent it back to North Korea, and are buying American coal to take its place. They're getting ready to, set to handle this. He had a tweet today, said, they can handle it or we will. I used to be my job to read about the news in Korea every day. And it doesn't not make me an expert, but I did read it every day, okay? And we were, moments away from war dozens of times over the last 20 years, okay?
Really?
So it is brinkmanship all the time. It stays at a low level. He has held us up for food and oil and so forth. It's like, we're going to really do something this time unless you give us something real quick, and we gave them something. This has gone on for years and years and years. This, so part of me is there's not a sure sign that this is different from this, but there are two things that sort of suggest it may be. One is he now has nuclear weapons that we believe can reach the western U.S. Mm-hmm. Made the Obama administration decision to kill strategic defense initiative, to kill the missile defense, look very short-sighted at this moment. He also had so we're more worried about them, and they are more they're not sure how restrained, how prudent this guy is. They kind of knew what was coming from his father and his grandfather, but they're not
so much
it's sort of it's interesting because kind of crazy sort of works in Trump's favor right now, right? He does these things and people are like, I better be wary of the United States because there's no telling what this guy might do. But in his case, crazy works against it, right? Because
all right, I'd like to move on to Jerrod and hear what he's got to say.
I mean, it's incredibly unsettling. I mean, you have two leaders who have a sort of a disposition towards at least rhetorical belligerence with theoretically their hands on the buttons for nuclear weapons. I mean, it's unsettling. I mean, it's not it's not like I said, these sort of shows of force are not incredibly new. And threats from the North Korean government are also not new. I mean, I've grown up my entire life, hearing threats from the North Korean government, annihilating the U.S. and the Western aggressors. But it is unsettling when you think about when you read tweets from Trump, China better take care of it or we will. I mean, that's unsettling.
What about the fact that they actually have discovered that China has supplied them with parts for these missiles? Some of the missiles that they've been able to gather from the sea, they've actually discovered have China on them.
I mean,
it's always assumed, right?
Yeah.
That's not.
I don't find that
new.
completely shocking.
Yeah, it's sort of China, Pakistan, and them, sort of a network of developing that technology. I think Iran's done some deals with them too. All the good guys.
Okay, well, thank you. And finally, perhaps the biggest story this week was the United Airlines passenger being dragged off a flight. Dr. David Dow was forcibly removed from a flight from Chicago to Louisville to make room for United crew members. So, Jerrod Laber, how do you think United can bounce back from this?
Quite frankly, I'm not sure. This was not. I mean, this was not going to be. This was not an easy situation on any side. I mean, I think it's useful to dispel sort of misconceptions. Like, this was not a result of like United overbooking a flight or anything like that. And like I saw stories, popping up all week about it's like, oh, Delta paid $11,000 for this person to not fly and whatnot, but it's a different situation. There's a difference between offering, money for a flight, that somebody, due to like delays and whatnot to try to create room, versus like involuntarily denying somebody, but we're trying to remove somebody from boarding. And there, so there are certain regulations that would prevent them from offering a high amount of money. I'm sure there's had been some amount of money that would have got them off the plane, but there are regulations that keep the United from being able to do that. So it was not an easy situation on any side, but I think it's safe to say the aviation police probably overreacted a little bit and used excessive force.
They've certainly apologized over and over and over again. Do you think they can do anything to bounce back, Bill Buck?
Well, I mean, coming from a PR background, they were days late on. They really missed the ball on this to begin with.
All the PR people agree on that point.
There's another point in the discussion where we'll talk about people's reaction to like what they see on television. I don't know how you're the CEO of a company and you aren't
appalled.
Like, you aren't completely freaked out that no one's ever going to want to fly on your airline again. Like, that would be my first reaction. Be like, how many customers do we potentially lose over this? And the other part of the story is, this was not about, it wasn't overbooking. It was to accommodate United flight crew. United probably should have figured out another way to get their crew or move people around or found a solution that didn't involve, breaking the nose of a 69-year-old man.
Apparently, he also had a concussion and lost both of his front teeth.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty profound. Well, their stock certainly took a nosedive. They've taken a big hit.
I think it's I don't know. I don't think that'll last that long. It's not a permanent statement on the value of the company. But I do think what's happened here is this is outrage at the whole BS of flying, right? All the things that you get put through to fly on a plane, the shoes, the pat down, all the rudeness and stand here and shove there and stop that and start this and you're crammed into these little bitty seats and it's just this sort of this is America saying enough. And there were I saw these things, innovative ideas I would like to see come out, like like an Uber type of deal for plane. I want to go from here to Phoenix next Tuesday. Who bids on, like hotels.com, who bids on giving me a good flight?
Yeah, they get
just,
kind of do that, but not really.
Yeah. And so, and let there be more players in it. Like, what do you get? You have basically four choices. And most of the country, like this part of the country, it's, certain ones, and out west, it's certain other ones,
Right,
so,
into Europe and different parts, you got a pretty limited choice. Jerrod Laber, what do you think?
I definitely agree, allowing more sort of foreign, if you want to wipe out United, allow more foreign competition.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a big fan of that. Yeah.
Is this a regulation issue? Is it
there's a regulation against foreign ownership of domestic airlines.
Yeah.
So there's all these foreign, like Etihad. There's about 3 like Middle East airlines.
Oh,
like
they have fantastic
Dubai.
reputations too. They
right.
really, everyone
that
I know
want to
that's
be in
flown
here
them.
that can't. They would come in tomorrow if we let them.
Do you think this might?
They're also
Trump's-
massively subsidized by their governments.
Are they?
They are.
Well, there's a lot of debate about that. I've read about that. And they say that's not true. Etihad says they got one government loan to get into business, and they paid the loan back. So, yeah, government helped them start, but they have not helped them since.
Well, Jerrod,
They're also profitable, so they don't need a lot of government help, which is, we don't manage to be able to do that here.
Jerrod, do you think that Trump might go after that regulation? He's Mr. Anti-regulation. Do you think this might be an opportunity for him?
I doubt it.
He hates the airports. You know.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what the last time Donald Trump flew like a commercial
Like
flight.
his
So
own
yeah,
flight,
so
his own
I'm not
flight, right.
I'm not convinced that the airline industry
hasn't
is
lived
first
the,
thing on his mind.
All right.
He also didn't have the greatest success running an airline.
Oh, that's
That too,
right. He
yeah.
had his own Trump airline. Well, all right. Well, on that note, let's take some questions from our viewers. So we will start with Marjorie Terry. Without airstrikes, how would you enforce against Assad the ban on chemical weapons? Who wants to take that?
Why would you do it without airstrikes? Why would you take that tool out of the box?
And go with ground?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we can be pretty effective from the air. We can target pretty well. Our people aren't at risk. You know, why would you? I guess I don't know why you would do that.
Well, Bill Buck, do you have an opinion on another way than airstrikes?
I don't know, other than getting Russia to actually enforce what they, the deal that they said that they cut with Assad to get rid of chemical weapons. Clearly, they were not being straight with us. But that, do we want to go to war with Russia over that?
Well, what are the other options? Sanctions, I guess, clearly haven't worked.
Oh, I mean, what are you sanctioning at this point, right? There's not much left.
Okay, all right. Well, Marjorie,
Happy
I hope
day.
that answered your question. Charles Logan, after this PR disaster, how will airlines deal with overbooked flights if no one leaves voluntarily? Tasers? I don't know.
Well, I mean, you can't, there has to be some system, right? There has to be, and what they've done is they've worked it out with the government. So it's, it's a government rule. It's like, that was part of the thing, is they couldn't offer them any more money. They were not allowed to. They maxed out what they're allowed to offer this guy.
And I think that was, I read a report that was $3,500. You could get up to $3,500.
And so I don't know. I mean, most people just leave and take the money, and you get a sweet trip out of it later or whatever.
Jerrod, what's
I
your
mean,
opinion?
they could lobby to try to remove the regulation. Yeah, maybe they could they could offer other types of credits for flights, maybe flights of greater value. I mean, I really don't know.
What about the concept of not overbooking the flight? I mean, it was interesting to see the paragraph. It's like, all airlines overbook their flights except for JetBlue. And so JetBlue's got it right, and they've got competitive rates, and they've got a great, track record for the most part. So I think that's the solution, is for them to just stop overbooking flights.
Well, but as we know, this wasn't actually a case of the flight being overbooked. It was a case of United wanting to move 4 crew members to Louisville. So it seems like there might be some management issues involved
Of moving
as well
crew around.
as,
I think one of the passengers asked why they couldn't drive there. I don't know how far they had to go. Surely there might be a commuter plane that's out there and available. I have to say, I have waited at the airport for crew to arrive.
Yeah.
That's
It's not
definitely
easy to
held
get
up
to
flight.
Louisville.
Yeah. And
Oh,
so-
no, no, Louisville is no
Yeah,
direct
that's
flight
their
to
thing.
Louisville.
It's like you were holding up a whole plane, and I don't know that Trump won't take opportunity to get involved with this, because he called LaGuardia. He does have to land the plane he has. You can't go to a private airport, right? He has to have a long runway to land that plane. It's a jet plane, right? And so he, and he called LaGuardia a third world dump. I mean, he's campaigned on it. He's talked about it. And so I don't know that he won't take this as like his bridge to go
For
at it.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
And, perhaps a good segue to infrastructure.
Because that'll be roads and airports, and it won't be anything else. There won't be mass transit at all in it, just about.
Okay, and now it's time for the most underreported stories of the week. Who wants to start? Jerrod?
Yeah, I'll start.
Okay.
So mine comes from a story I saw on humanprogress.org. Very recently, the UN released a new report on global wealth inequality. And while global wealth inequality is shrinking because of the economic development of countries like China and Syria, but within countries, absolute wealth inequality has increased. But we also see gains in relative wealth inequality. We see reductions, sorry, in relative wealth inequality. So the bottom, the bottom rungs of some of these countries are experiencing economic growth that they have not previously experienced.
Oh, that's good underreported news. Brian?
Arizona last week signed into law one of the most forward-looking school choice legislation ever. They have education savings accounts where you can say you can tell school district will give you 90% of the money they would have given spent to educate your kid in the public schools. You can use it for private school tuition or special ed, whatever you need to access school materials to homeschool and so forth. Really puts the parents in charge of education.
Thank you.
Over the weekend in Spain, the FBI arrested on an FBI warrant was a Russian hacker. I think that is a story that will yield some more information. And today, The Guardian reported that five European countries' intelligence agencies and Australia were tracking contact between the Trump campaign and Russian agents back to 2015, and they are the ones who actually tipped off the FBI and the CIA to us. And according to the Guardian story, there is specific and concrete corroborative evidence of collusion of hacked material between the Trump campaign and Russian officials.
Well, that's all for this week. All right, I'm Heather Godwin, and thank you for watching The Square Circle. We'll see you next week.
If you have a passion for helping people, want to launch a new charity, or need to raise funds, Voluntary Solutions can help. You have a passion for helping people. We have a passion for helping you. Visit voluntarysolutionsdc.com 844-739-5488.